It's my special privilege to introduce our speaker for tonight, Sheldon.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Sheldon Fetty. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, look at that. There's a timer here to give people hope that you'll get home on time. We'll see how that works out. I'm sober since July 17th of 1996, and for that I am incredibly grateful. My sponsor, a lot of you guys know my sponsor. His name's Charlie H. He lived here for many years and just moved away recently. My home group is the Common Solution Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm proud of all three of those things. And it's great to be here and see some friends that I haven't seen for a long, long time. Keith was an old timer when I got sober, so I suppose it goes to show if you don't drink and you don't die, you just get to accumulate more and more time, Keith. And this is beautiful. It's a beautiful meeting and a beautiful facility, and I'm sure you guys are going to get to help a lot of people. I'm excited to see that this is going on. So I was born in England. I don't sound like it. I was born in England and moved here when I was 16 years old. I was born to non-alcoholic parents. Now, I know that if you're born to alcoholic parents, it kind of gives you more panache in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? My parents were non-alcoholic. My mom likes the occasional glass of wine. Sometimes, for sport, I will persuade her to have a second glass because it's funny. My dad told me one time that he got drunk twice in his life, and he didn't drink ever after that because he didn't like the way it made him feel. It dulled his ability to have fun. All right, so I was raised by animals, clearly. I had my first drink when I was very young. I was about 9 years old when I had my first drink, and I became an everyday drinker by the time I was about 13. And I'm an alcoholic. I only have alcoholism. It's the only disease that I suffer from. But I did do some drugs, and I don't mention that to upset any of the old timers. It's just my story. And one of the things that happened when I was new is that people with good intention that were hammering so hard on the singleness of purpose made me feel like because I drank, and I drank alcoholically, but because I also did drugs, perhaps I didn't belong in Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is the only program I've ever been a member of. These steps are the only steps I ever worked. All my sponsors have been members of Alcoholics Anonymous. All my home groups have been AA home groups. And Alcoholics Anonymous has allowed me not to have a drink for a little over 29 years. And by coincidence, I haven't had a drug since then either. And I'm grateful that I found a home in Alcoholics Anonymous. By the time I was 16, I was in real trouble. I graduated high school in England at 16, not because I'm smart, but because that's how old you are when you graduate school in England. And at 16 years old, I left home and I got on the welfare. I got my own apartment and I got my own shack, and me and a bunch of hippies moved in together, and it was a disaster. We were drinking everything we could get our hands on, spending every dime we could get our hands on. The place was a mess. And my dad, who had already moved to America, came to visit. And he took one look at this apartment we were living in, and he said, oh no, no son of mine's gonna live like this. He said, I'm gonna take you to California. We're gonna sober you up. We're gonna get you to go to college. You're gonna become an attorney or a doctor or something fancy, and you're gonna live a good life. Well, I don't know much about going to college, and I don't know much about getting sober. But I had seen the TV show Chips. And California was palm trees and beaches and pretty girls, and I was in. So I got on a plane and I moved to Southern California. The only thing I was worried about was I didn't know whether or not Californians drank. And it turns out they do. And I got to California in November of 1984, and within 2 or 3 months I'd met my people, and it was on. Very soon after that, I met my real people. I found this little rock and roll band called the Grateful Dead, and I got on the bus in 85, to end of 85, beginning of 86, and I'm still on the bus. By the way, if you're new and you're worried about whether or not you're ever going to have fun again, on Friday, I'm leaving to San Francisco for the 60th anniversary Grateful Dead party concert, right? So you get to still party, you get to still have fun, even though you're sober. Life does not stop at sobriety. In fact, it really begins and becomes fire with sobriety. But I met these people and I had a great time. And I got to tell you, I love drinking. I really did. I've heard people from the podium say, and it's a quote out of the book. It's a misquote out of the book, really. It's close to what the book says. But they say that their best day drinking was not as good as their worst day sober. And I always think to myself, what were you drinking? Right? I mean, if it was that bad, for Christ's sakes, you should have quit years ago. I had an amazing time drinking. I had a blast. It did several things for me. Now, I'm listening to Mark, and I'm kind of laughing to myself because everybody belongs here. I'm the opposite of Mark. Mark's this guy that's an athlete, well, right? Good student. I barely got out of high school. I stole my diploma when I left high school. I mean, I went to college for 3 weeks. It was the worst 3 weeks of my life. And I never was the kid that fit in. I mean, I never dated no cheerleader, for crying out loud. I was never class president. None of that was true for me. But early in my drinking, what booze did for me was it allowed a guy that didn't ever feel like he fit in. It allowed a guy that felt awkward, that was too short for his body, that was too fat for his height, that was, you know, I'm a Jewish kid and there's a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe and I'm too Jewish for my nose and I just feel like I'm a disaster and I don't fit in and I don't feel comfortable anywhere. And when I drink, the magic happens. And I feel like I fit in, and I feel like I belong, and I feel like one of you. And that happens for the first part of my drinking. And then that stops happening. And I continue to drink, and I continue to drink because of the way it felt in the second half of my drinking. I still didn't fit in. I still didn't like you, and I knew you still didn't like me. I still felt awkward. I still felt out of place. But with enough booze in me, I didn't care. I just didn't care. I could numb myself to where I could be in any situation and not care, knowing the truth about me, knowing the awkwardness, knowing that I didn't fit in. I just didn't care. I had a blast until I was about 25 years old. I got very lucky. My family are fairground pitch people. My grandfather, my father, and myself, we sold Ginsu knives, oven cleaners, kitchen gadgets at state and county fairs. And when I was 19 years old, I got picked up by a company that was selling on QVC. And I was on QVC Home Shopping Network. I had infomercials that ran, and all of a sudden, this awkward, out-of-place kid is making a lot of money, and he's getting a lot of attention. And I felt like Wilson says in his story, I had arrived. And you would think that this kid from the wrong side of the tracks, this welfare kid from a divorced home, that all of a sudden, this happens to me. And you would think it would have solved my problems. If I was not alcoholic, all of a sudden my dreams have come true. And you would think I would have said, well, I'm going to slow down with the drinking now because I got everything I want and I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to be a big shot. But it wasn't like that for me. It was just fuel on the fire. And I lost that job. I was about 22 years old, and they fired me from that job. And I knew why, by the way, when they fired me. We always know why, don't we? And it's never the drinking. I knew why they fired me. It was this guy, Bernard. Bernard was an anti-Semite. He didn't like Jews, and that's why he fired me. And I knew that was the truth. That's not what they said. On the exit interview, what they said was they thought it was inappropriate for them to have an alcoholic crack addict as their national spokesperson. I think that was an overreaction to what was really going on. They fired me. I was able to get another good job. I lost that good job. I got another good job. I lost that good job. Now I'm 25 years old, and I can't get a good job. And I moved to Las Vegas because I have one friend left in the world. And he'd be a kid that I'd known in California for years. He'd come here to go to UNLV, and he was willing to let me sleep on his couch when nobody else would. I'd burn every friend that was left in the world. And so that was when I was 28. I'm going to back up, because at 25, what happened is I went to my first detox. I went to a 7-day spin dry, an indigent recovery place. I walked in this place. I couldn't imagine how I had gotten there. A few years earlier, I was the darling of QVC. Now, all of a sudden, I'm a homeless guy in a homeless shelter. And I don't know how that happened. It seemed impossible. I never consciously made any decisions that would have put me there. It just seemed like my life was out of control. When you guys, when I first got here, said to me, "You're powerless over alcohol and your life is unmanageable." I mean, if I could have honestly looked at my life and what had been happening and how quickly it had gone downhill and all the problems and trouble that were been going on, it would have been easy for me to see that. But I wasn't prepared to look. But at 25 years old, I go into this detox facility. And I come out and I go into a halfway house. And this place was fabulous. They provided food. They had AA members coming in the place. It was really, as far as halfway houses go, it was top notch. And I go into this halfway house and I'm there for 25 or 26 days. And the most surprising thing happened to me. The thing that I never saw coming. See, I always thought that if I quit drinking, my life would straighten out, right? I always thought that if I quit drinking, my life would get better. I mean, it seemed like I'd been told that all my life, right? My dad had been saying that to me for years. For God's sake, Sheldon, you get all these great opportunities. You burn them all to the ground. What's the matter with you? If you just didn't drink and you just didn't do no dope, you would have a dream life. You'd have the world in the palm of your hand if you just didn't drink. I'd hear it from bosses as they were wagging their finger at me, kicking me out. They go, "Sheldon, you're such a great salesman. Everybody likes you. You seem to be doing, but my God, man, you can't show, if you just didn't drink," seemed to be the theme. If you just didn't drink, you could be anything. I'd hear it from a couple of girls. I heard it from a couple of judges. I'd hear it from everybody that had any participation in my life. It always seemed to be the same thing. You know, my God, man, you've got so much potential. I heard my favorite definition of that, because I used to think that was a compliment. Right? My favorite definition of so much potential is you've never done anything ever in your life. And I'm that guy, right? But if you would just quit drinking, and I'm hearing that from all these people, and then I'm looking at my life. And it seems like I've lost every job when I quit drinking. I've lost every friendship when I'm quit drinking. I've lost every partnership when I'm through drinking. Every time I drink, my life crumbles. So it makes sense, right? I'm hearing it from all these authority figures, and I'm looking at my life, and it makes sense. Quit drinking, you'll have a good life. So now I've gone through detox, and I've quit drinking, and I'm a 2 or 3 or 4 weeks sober, and I'm waiting for the good life. And this is when the surprise comes. See, when I am in a state of abstinence, something happens to me that I'm not ready for. And in a state of abstinence, what happens to me is that I get this low-level anxiety. I don't like using the word depression because that insults people that have real depression. I have what I like to call situational depression. Right? Real depression is a chemical imbalance that people really deal with. What I have is I have situational depression. I tell people in AA when I'm new, "I'm depressed." And they go, "Well, you just lost your job. They just repoed your car. Your dad's not talking to you, and you got a warrant out for your arrest. That's depressing. If you weren't depressed, we would take you and get you some help." Right? So I've got situational depression, low-level anxiety. I feel like I'm alone in the world. I feel like nobody likes me. I've got this head that starts talking to me, and it says, "You know what, Sheldon, you're a piece of crap. You've always been a piece of crap. You're always going to be a piece of crap. You're a loser, a loser. Nobody likes you. These people are only being nice to you because their sponsor said they have to be." And then I get the other voice. Go, "Have a drink, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink. You never drink. Why not have a drink? You deserve it. You've been sober now, what? 24 days. Have a drink, have a drink. You've earned it." And I got all this going on with this emptiness, this loneliness, this frustration, this anxiety, the voices in my head. And I'm sitting in this freaking halfway house, and I'm telling you, I just need some relief. I don't want to get crazy drunk. I don't. I don't want to burn my life to the ground. It's not what I want to do. I understand what happened last time I drank, and I don't want to do that again. But what I want to do is I want to get just a little bit of I remember when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, and I'd have a little something, something, and all of a sudden the world would make sense. And that's what I want. And I don't mean to go crazy. But here's what I'm going to do. I got a plan, and it's a good plan. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have one, maybe two, three at the most, no more than four. I'm just going to have a couple just to take the edge off. Second surprise. I think that I should be able to do that. But somewhere between 1 and 4, you know what happens? Somewhere between 1 and 4, no matter how many promises I've made to myself or others, somewhere between 1 and 4, no matter what the consequences are that are hanging over me, somewhere between 1 and 4, no matter what is on the table, I change my mind. And I go to number 5 and 6 and 7 or however many it takes, and then I get stopped. I never choose. I've never done this ever. I've never said, yeah, that's about right. I think I'll shut it down. What has to happen to me is I have to run out of money. Or I have to get in trouble. Running out of money is the main reason. Like if you were to, 9 out of 10 times I get stopped is because I run out of money. A couple times I got arrested. A couple times I got in trouble from family members or friends. But most of the time what happens is I run out of money and then I get forced into sobriety. And then this pattern starts to evolve from coming out of that halfway house for the next 3.5 years. And the pattern is this. I get forced to stop. I come to in the middle of my life and I go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I've got to quit drinking. I've got to quit drinking. I can't keep living like this. This is horrendous. Who wants to live like this, for God's sakes? I'm going to quit. I'm going to go back to AA. I'm going to go to those meetings. I'm going to go and do everything they tell me to do. And I'm going to quit. I need to quit. I'm going to quit. And I quit. And I quit for anywhere from 1 to 30 days. But somewhere in that 1 to 30 days, what happens to me is that cycle, the anxiety, the low-level depression, the feelings of loneliness, the feelings of not being enough, not measuring up, and the voices in my head, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink. And I get tortured by this, and I do it again. I'm the do-it-again guy. For 3.5 years, I get drunk to get sober, to get sober, to get drunk, in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous over and over and over again. Not understanding why. None of it makes any sense to me. And you go up to an old-timer and you say, hey man, how come every time I have a drink, I end up burning my life to the ground? And they go, that's because you have a phenomenon of craving. And I have no idea what they're talking about, which is cool because that's what phenomenon means, right? Is that none of us know what it means. And there's all kinds of great reasons and excuses. And I've heard some fabulous scientific acetone, all this. I don't know. I tell you, I don't know. This is what I know about the phenomenon of craving. This is how I know I have it. What I want to do when I drink is I want to have 1, maybe 2, 3 at the most, no more than 4. That's what I want to do. There's a magic number. Your magic number might be different than mine. You might need 2 drinks, you might need 6 drinks, but we've all got a magic number. And at that moment, we have that drink and we go, this is it. That's what I'm going for. Now, if I did not have a phenomenon of craving, my life would look a lot different. Here's what it would look like. My number's 4. I'd get to the 4th drink and I'd go, this is perfect. I feel fine. And so I would not have the 5th drink. And I would chill for about 30, 40, 50 minutes or an hour until that buzz started to wear off. And I would have another small drink to get back to the 4 level. And I might drink too much, too long, might spend too much money. I might be a little late for work because I'm a little hungover, but I wouldn't burn my life to the ground because I would try and maintain this 4-level buzz because there's nothing physical going on with me. I just want to be buzzed. But I tell you, it makes no sense. The Big Book says that the allergy explanation explains things that we could not otherwise explain. What I can't explain without the allergy is why do I have 6, 7, 8, 9? Why do I puke on the floor, pee my pants, not show up for work, pulling everything I got to try and get some? Why do I do what I do? Why does my life look as ridiculous as it does if all I'm trying to do is get a 4-drink buzz? And I tell you, I don't know why. I can't explain the allergy, can't explain the phenomenon of craving, but I can tell you, I've lived it. I've been drinking past my goal my entire drinking career. I have been drinking through the sweet spot and burning my life down every single time. So then they say, well, if I believe, okay, I got this craving, I have this allergy, okay, what's the solution? Well, AA doesn't have a solution for that. We just don't. We say if you have it, you're going to have it forever. AA doesn't treat that. There is no perfect inventory that will let you drink 4 beers. There just isn't. We don't treat it. We suggest entire abstinence, which then puts us into a seething cauldron of debate, right? I mean, we want to argue about that. Entire abstinence. What about my birthday? I'm going to get married one day. I'm going to need to toast. I mean, I just want to argue that point because entire abstinence sounds way too drastic. But that's what they got to suggest. But abstinence sucks. See, abstinence for me is like doing time. Abstinence for me is like punishment for my drinking. Abstinence for me is at best boring, at worst anxiety-ridden. Abstinence for me is not a way to live. And if you say that to some old timer and you go, I just don't know if I can stay sober forever, you know what they're going to say. They say, well, in AA, we don't stay sober forever. We stay sober one day at a time. And they say it like it's good news. But what I hear is we stay sober one day at a time. One long, miserable day at a time. Forever, ever, ever. Oh my God, I'm terrified of that. I mean, really, and if you say you can't do that, they whip out their favorite. Well, if you can't stay sober one day at a time, just stay sober 1 minute at a time. Yeah, 60 seconds of just, are you kidding me? I can't live like that. I can't do it. What I didn't know was what Alcoholics Anonymous does. And what Alcoholics Anonymous does is it treats abstinence. That's what we do here. That's what the steps are for, the home groups for, the sponsors for. That's what sponsoring new people are for. By this action and activity, by the things that I do in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would never believe that if you told me that this could possibly be the thing that treated my alcoholism. So for 3.5 years, I went in and out of AA. For 3.5 years, I couldn't stay sober. I couldn't do it. And in July of '96, I showed up here, not physically any more beat up than previous times, not more broke, not more trouble. I'd been in more trouble, had more problems. In fact, when I got sober, that guy that I moved to Vegas to sleep on his couch, him and I had gotten an apartment. I'd gotten a job, and I'd even been able to talk my way into a car loan and had a car. I mean, my life was on an upward spring in July of '96, way better than it had been in, January of '96 or July of '95, for crying out loud. I mean, I was on a roll. But inside me, I was broken. Inside me, July 4th weekend of '96, I'd been down and hung out with some hippies in Dana Point, California, and we had done everything. We had drank enough to qualify me in Alcoholics Anonymous, but we were taking acid and smoking crack, and I don't mean to upset the old timers, but it's what we did. It's what we did. A friend of mine says, and I love this, he says, if I'd have known back in the '80s and '90s that I was going to be here tonight sharing my story when someone offered me some dope, I would have said no, because I didn't want to upset any of the AA members, but I didn't know I was going to be telling this story, so I said yes, and it's problematic for some, I know, but we went nuts that weekend. And I'm sleeping in the back of my car, and I'm wide awake, and physically, if I would have tried to get up to go to the bathroom, I would have fallen flat on my face. But my head was alive. It was awake. And it was telling me everything I already knew about myself, what a loser I was, and how much trouble I was in, and how I was going to live this way forever. And if the best I could hope for was that I would die soon, and I knew I wouldn't. I knew I would linger, go in and out of AA for the next 30 years, all right, and die at the ripe old age of 60. Which, then seemed like it was old, but it's only 3 years from now. It's not, I can see it. I can smell it from here, for crying out loud. So I come back to Vegas after that party, and I'm just a mess, and I'm emotionally a mess, and I'm still drinking, and I'm still doing what I'm doing, but I'm crying, and I don't know what to do. On July 16th of '96, I went to bed, and I asked the God I don't believe in to let me die in my sleep. And I woke up on July 17th, and I was mad because I woke up. And I prayed to a God I didn't believe in. I prayed because they taught me to pray in AA, but I prayed to a God I didn't believe in. And part of me the cynic in me wants to say that it was a combination of being hungover, not sleeping really well, and some memory of some crotchety old timer at a meeting. And the romantic in me wants to tell you that maybe I was being moved by God. But I woke up after that prayer and I was compelled. Go to AA and do what they say. Just go to AA and do what they say. And that's what I did. And I was sober 2 or 3 days when the guy that was going to become my first sponsor and sponsored me for 20 years was at a meeting. And I was sitting in that meeting and I was shell-shocked and I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know if this was going to work. It hadn't worked in the past. Why would I think it was going to work this time? And this guy shared. And I will never forget what he said. I remember the exact words he said. In the middle of his share, he said this. He said, "It is true that I suffer from drinking and that drinking causes me problems. But what I really suffer from is abstinence." And then he said this. He said, "My alcoholism begins where the bag and the bottle end." And when he said that, I knew he knew my secret. When he said that, I knew that the gig was up. Because that was my problem. My problem wasn't drinking. My problem was that I couldn't stay sober. And I went up to him and I asked him for help. And he took me on a journey through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 1 was easy. Some sponsors like you to write an essay or 2 or 3 or 4. He didn't have me do that. We had a 10-minute conversation. I mean, it was not that complicated for me to look at my life and say, oh my gosh, I'm powerless over. Hey, do you drink when you don't want to? Do you drink when you promised you won't? Do you drink do you cry sometimes when you're drinking because you didn't want to drink, but you're drinking? I mean, do you drink when you don't want to? Yeah. Life's unmanageable. We overcomplicate that, I think, today in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think if you're sober more than a couple of years that the unmanageability of sobriety that we talk about, and it exists, I don't think it's a step 1 question. I think it's a 6 and 7 and 10 question. I think step 1 is a newcomer step, and the unmanageability of my life in step 1 is what's it like when you drink? Are you paying the rent? Are you working at the job you want to work at? How are your relationships with your family? What does your life look like? Are you living your life by choice, or are you living your life on the run? And I was living my life on the run. I wasn't making choices for my life. My life was a series of reactions. And we had that conversation. It was a short conversation. And then we came to step 2, and I told him I can't do step 2. I don't believe in God. I can't do step 2. Can't do step 2, can't do step 3, don't believe in God. I've been lying to sponsors for 3.5 years about believing in God. I don't believe in God. And he smiled and he said, you know, you don't have to believe in God to do step 2. I said, what? He said, you don't. You don't have to believe in God to do step 2, and you don't have to believe in God to do step 3, which to me sounded crazy because if you read the steps, it kind of sounds like you do. But that's why the steps are just, they're like titles to chapters. You got to read the book and what's behind them. They're not the steps. They're the titles to the things you're going to read about the steps. And he said to me, he said, look, I'll show you in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous where it says that you don't have to believe in God to do step 2. But he said, in the meantime, go ask the people you like why they're sober. Well, that's dumb, isn't it? You go into an AA meeting and you ask just about anybody why they're sober. We all say the same thing. It may as well be on a little cheat card, right, that we hand out. If anybody asks you why you're sober, say this. I'm sober today because of a power greater than myself that I found in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd like to thank God for AA, and I'd like to thank AA for God. And it just, you know, and listen, I don't mean to goof on that, because if you want to know why I'm sober today because of a power greater than myself that I found in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I do want to thank God for it. But at the time for me to hear that, it's like the door slamming. Oh, God's the answer. I just told you I don't believe in God. Why are you now reinforcing my fear? You're killing me. You're sentencing me to death. And he said, no, no, no. Those people are sober today because of the power greater than themselves. Let me ask you a question. If you found that power in step 2, or you found it in step 3, why would you do step 4? You've already got the solution. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's still so many more steps to do. If you found God in 2 or 3, why would you do the rest of the steps? You'd have found the solution. And then he took me to the big book. And in the way he taught me that on page 47 in our big book is where we actually work step 2. And this is what the question is for step 2. It says we need to ask the new man one simple question. Do you now believe? And I said, no, I don't believe. Stop it. It's getting worse here. Do you now believe? I don't believe. No. He said, wait. It's a comma, not a period. Let's read the rest of the sections. Do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe in a power greater than yourself? Do you now believe? No. Cool. The word or means that the answer to the first part of the question was no. Otherwise, it wouldn't say or, it would say and. It would say, do you now believe and are you willing to believe? But it doesn't. It says or. You don't have to believe in God to do step 2. You just have to be willing to look. Not just willing, even willing. It says even willing. It's like a little bit. Are you even willing? And as soon as a man says that he does believe or he is even willing to believe, then we emphatically ensure him. Like, yeah, baby, done. Step 2 in the back. It's over. Don't worry about it. Let's do step 3. Wait a minute. You want me to turn my will and my life over to the care of a power that I don't believe in? Yes. Yes, I do. Won't that make me a hypocrite? Yes. Yes, it will. Sheldon, you got a lot of problems. Hypocrite is one of them. But it's not one that's going to kill you. Let's not worry about that right now. Let's just move forward with the process. And we went through the 4th step and we wrote the inventory. And I don't have time to tell you about my inventory experience, but it was magical. It was magical because I was open-minded enough to go through the process. But what it did was it did a couple of things for me. It removed some of the bigger noises in my head. But most importantly, what it did was it taught me a way that I was going to be able to live my life for the rest of my life to keep those noises at minimum or gone or at bay when they get loud. And I learned the process. And in step 5, for the first time in my life, I shared with another man all of my squirmy secrets and fears. I put it on the table. Instead of doing what I'd always done, falling apart inside, anxious, upset, uptight, afraid, not feeling like I'm good enough, voices in my head, and you say, how you doing? What do I say? Fine, I'm fine. Fine, how are you? You're fine, I'm fine, fine. We're all fine, everybody's fine, fine. That's what I say because I can't be with you. And I do this 5th step, and I join. And I join. And 6 and 7, don't worry about that. Nobody understands 6 and 7. They were the flyover steps. I showed up in the morning at his house, shared the 5th step. By the time I left, I was on my 8th step. It was fabulous. And I got about the business of paying my 9th step back, and I complained about that. There was an old timer, John Todman, he's passed now, and I went to him crying because I did the math on the money I owe. And if I was going to pay everybody back at my newcomer salary, it was going to take me 30 years to pay everybody back. I said, John, it's going to take 30 years. He said, you know what you'll have when you're done, kid? I go, what, John? He goes, 30 years. And he laughed and he walked away, you know. But the truth is that I didn't make a newcomer income for very long, and they all got taken care of much quicker than I ever could have imagined. And then we start to live our lives in this way through 10 and 11. And I want to share with you something that's been on my heart lately. I joke about 6 and 7. I tell you that they're the flyover steps and nobody understands 6 and 7. And it seems like when we first go through the steps in our first run, we go very quickly through those steps. Somebody said in a meeting one time, wow, they can't be all that important. I mean, Bill Wilson only wrote 1 paragraph on 6, and then he wrote the prayer for 7, and that's all there was. I mean, there isn't much written about it. I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that Bill Wilson didn't write much on 6 and 7 in the big book because there was nothing left to say. Because the entire big book, the entire program, everything we do is about step 6 and 7. It is the whole ball of wax. It is everything. I'll tell you what I mean by that. When I show up at Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm powerless over alcohol and my life's unmanageable, and what I'm really saying is that my life is a disaster, and unless I can find a way to truly turn everything over to God, to live a life that is connected in that way, I'm not going to be able to drink. I'm not going to be able to stay sober. I'm not going to be able to drink, and my life is going to continue to spiral. I am on my own. I am done. And in step 2, what I do is I say that I'm going to go look for this power. I'm going to go look for a way for me to have a step 6 and 7 experience. I'm going to go on a journey where I can maybe find a 6 and 7 experience. And in step 3, I decide to have that experience. So in step 3, we talk about step 3 a lot about turning our will and our life over to the care of God. And I don't read our book that way. I read our book as making a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. Now this morning when I woke up, I made a decision to go to work. And it was a real decision. I was really going to go. In fact, I did end up there. I made the decision to go to work. You couldn't have talked me out of it. It was a decision. I was going to work, and I was still in bed. In order for me to get to work, I had to do some other things. I had to do step 4, get up, take a shower, brush my teeth. Step 5, put on my clothes. Step 6, I had to get in the car. All right. Step 7, I showed up at my office. Step 3 isn't about turning my will and my life over to the care of God, and I'll tell you why I think that as we progress through this journey. But in step 4, what did I do? I wrote a list of all the things that prevented me from having a step 6 and 7 experience. In step 5, I shared with another man what my life looks like when I don't have a 6 and 7 experience. In 8 and 9, I clear away the wreckage of my life, the damage I've done by not having a 6 and 7 experience. And in 10 and 11, I make sure, through spot check inventory in 10 and through reviews and evening review in 11, I make sure that I am living my life as best as I can in a 6 and 7 way. And then in step 12, I go look for other men that I can try to inspire to have a 6 and 7 experience. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Well, what is it that's destroyed and ruined my life? What is it that's caused me all of my problems? I mean, listen, this is dangerous because I'm going to share with you my spiritual view. What that is worth is nothing to you. You may share it, you may not. We don't preach spiritual views in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I want to share with you the way this works for me because you asked me to, so I'm gonna, right? And if you don't agree with it and it's different for you, that's perfectly okay. Complain to Keith, he's gonna take all the complaints after my talk is over, right? But for me, I used to pray to God that I would get the right place to live. I used to pray to God that I would get the right job. I used to pray to God that I would get the right girlfriend, as if God is a real estate agent or an employment agency, or for heaven help as a pimp. I don't think God cares where I work. I think he cares how I treat the people that I work with. I don't think he cares where I live. I think what he cares about is that there is love and peace and serenity in my home, and my home is used to help people. And I don't think he cares who I sleep with. I think he cares that I treat that person with kindness, love, and respect. I think what God cares about is the way that I react to life. So in step 4, what did I learn? I learned that regardless of how I feel, right? 3-column inventory written in the book, who they are, what they did, how it made me feel. Who they are, what they did, how it made me feel. I want to stay in how it made me feel because that's fun. Right? I might even get some sympathy for that. You might even hug me and tell me it's going to be okay. What the big book says right after column 3 is it says this: to see that the others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got, and we stayed sick and sore. That if you stay in 3, it will kill you. What we do is we then look at compassion. What might it have been like to be the other person? What if I was in their shoes? Why do I do that? So I can get free and I can notice the magic. Here's the magic. What's my real problem? I'm selfish. I am selfish. I want what I want when I want it, and I think I deserve a bigger piece. I'm dishonest. I'm not dishonest in a cash register way. Some of you are thieves. I'm not a thief. I'm not that guy, but I'm dishonest in this way. You give me 5% of the information, I'll make up the rest. I don't need to know everything about everybody. I think you look you up and no, I know what you're like, or no, I know what you're like. And I never make judgments that you're wonderful, right? I always judge you harshly, right? I'm dishonest. I lie that I know more than I know. I'm self-seeking. Every action I take is about me getting mine. And mostly, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'll lose something I already have, and I'm afraid that I won't get something that I want. And that's a trap. And I'll tell you why that's a trap, because if I I'm afraid I won't get something I want. And God gives into my bickering and my whining, and he gives me what I want. Does it fix the fear? No. Now I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. It just changed columns. That's all it did. The fear didn't get helped. It just switched columns. So I'm afraid. I'm afraid you won't like me. I'm afraid I won't measure up. I'm afraid. And I identify these feelings. And here's why it's magical. And here's why it's the most important thing we do. And here's why I believe it has breathed life into me. I've had an interesting 8 years. I'll tell you a brief synopsis of the last, is it 8 or is it 9? It's 8 years. And the first 20 years of my sobriety, I was a poster boy for Alcoholics Anonymous. I got sober, this little fat, ugly kid, met and married the prettiest girl in the room. We had a beautiful son. My career took off. I became king of the universe, big fancy house. Everything was absolutely, I mean, oh my God, it's because you didn't do a proper 4-step is why you didn't live like me. I mean, I didn't tell you that because I didn't want to insult you, but oh my God, I believed it. And then it happened. And some of you like me and you're about to change your mind. In 2018, I'm not going to even give you any of the excuses or reasons why, although they're good. I'm not going to give you any of them, although they're good. I stepped out on my marriage, and my marriage ended because I had an affair. And my life turned upside down. I was in a business partnership with a guy who, he didn't really steal the money, that's an exaggeration, but he moved it into an account I didn't have control over, and he weaned it back to me slowly, and the business was very difficult and very hard. And then they did construction in front of my business for an entire year. I'm a retail car guy. They closed the road. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. And then in the middle of this, while I'm trying to fight and survive all of this stuff, COVID happens. Do you remember COVID? That was hard on retail businesses. And then the second week of COVID, I had a stroke. I had a stroke and a seizure, and I broke my back, and I was bedridden for a year, and that was interesting, right? And then I start, things are moving along, and then my mom gets really sick with dementia, and she goes into an assisted living, and that's exciting. And in the meantime, I'm in a relationship it's difficult, and that's a mess. And then last week we closed my business, and so now I'm facing that disaster. So I'm not telling you that everything's gone my way, right? It's been a struggle, right? And in this struggle, what have I learned? How has steps 6 and 7 been life-changing for me? Now, I want you to tell you, I'm about to explain this to you, and I don't want you to think it's all day, every day, and I'm some kind of a saint. It comes in waves. I get relief in waves. There are times where I am a lunatic, but much less than you would think based on the way my life has unfolded the last few years. And here's what I've learned about 6 and 7. Early in my sobriety, I used to do inventory to figure out whose fault it was. I would do an inventory so I could figure out whose fault it was, and then I would decide whether or not I was going to have compassion and whether or not I was going to forgive them. And if I wasn't, I'd go to my sponsor, we'd fight about it till he forced me to do it, and then it would turn out to be okay. Here's what I do now. I do an inventory and I do this. I go, what's going on? This is what's going on. How's that making me feel? I'm afraid. I don't need to know why I'm afraid. I don't need to know what I'm afraid of. I don't need to know any of the details or whose fault it is that I'm afraid. I only need to know that I'm afraid. I'm angry. Look at that. It doesn't matter why I'm angry, or who I'm angry at, what they did, if it's their fault. It doesn't matter. What matters is, I'm angry. I'm being selfish. Look at that dishonesty. Look at me. I'm doing it again. I'm doing it again. And what do? Well, step 6. In step 6, I look at it and I ask myself the question, am I willing to have God remove not what they did, not who they are, not the circumstances, none of the details that I want to be bogged in the quagmire of. None of them, because they don't matter. Because listen, if I'm not afraid of this, I'll be afraid of that later. And if I'm not mad at you, I'll be mad at them. I mean, I live my life in this maze of selfishness, resentment, fear. If I focus on changing the situations and the circumstances, it's all nonsense. So what I do is I identify what's going on. I'm afraid, and I make a decision. This is what step 6 says. Am I now entirely willing to have God remove these defects of character? Not the cause, not the person, not the situation. None of that matters. Do I want God to free me of fear? And sometimes the answer is no. Hopefully less and less. But sometimes I feel power in the anger. Sometimes I feel power in the fear. Sometimes I feel power in the selfishness. Sometimes I get power from my dishonesty. But the question is, am I willing to have God take it? And if I am, then in step 7, I can humbly ask him, Papa, take this from me. And I spend many hours during the day over the last 8 years saying, Papa, don't let me be driven by this fear. It doesn't matter who's causing the fear. It matters that I'm afraid. Step 6 and 7 is everything we do. How do I turn my will and my life over to the care of God? I ask God to take care of those unruly, over-exaggerated reactions to life, these defects of character where I'm using my defense mechanisms against myself. I'm the guy that's turned the army on himself. Am I willing to have God remove that from me? Sometimes it's no. More and more, I hope it's yes. And that's why it's everything we do. When I talk about turning my life over, I don't do it in 3, I do it in 7. I do it minute by minute by minute. I do inventory regularly in 10 and 11 in order so I can identify not the people, not the problem, not the situation. Who cares? So I can identify what my reaction to the people, the situation, the places are, so I can ask God to remove it. Because I want to be free. How free do you want to be? I'll tell you one quick story and I'll sit down. This happened right as the pandemic started, right after I had the stroke. I got lucky. I had the stroke and there was no typical stroke symptoms, but it caused a seizure. And in the seizure, I shook so violently, my L4 vertebrae exploded and it was a disaster. And I didn't know if my business would survive COVID. I didn't know if I'd survive COVID. I didn't know if I'd walk again. I didn't know anything. I just lost my home group and my sponsor, and it was a very difficult time for me. And I'm laying in the bed. And I do what I'm trained to do because I'm a well-trained guy. And I go into prayer and meditation. And what happened in prayer and meditation is I got to feel peace. It was overwhelming. It was crazy. It was like none of the things I was worried about mattered anymore. And I felt free. And I was talking to a guy that I sponsored at the time, and he asked me to explain exactly what I meant when I said I got free. And this is what I told him. I said, when I was new, if you would have asked me what I wanted, I would have told you this. I want to know AA works. I just want to know AA works. What does that mean? It doesn't mean quit drinking. Because if you're telling me quit drinking and be miserable in my not drinking, I'm not interested in doing time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean quit drinking and be relatively comfortable in my own skin one day at a time, most of the time, that I can have a good and happy life not drinking. I want to know AA works. I want to know you'll set me free. I want to know AA works. And if AA is going to work, the second thing I'm going to have to know is I'm going to have to know God is real. If AA works, then God's going to have to be real. And I need to know 2 things. I need to know AA works, and I need to know God is real. And laying in that bed in that meditation, I knew that. I knew that AA worked and that God was real. And more importantly, I knew it wasn't new information. I'd never put the words to it before, but I had known it. My ex-wife and I, there's a bad day. My ex-wife and I, she was pregnant 4 times. We have 1 son. That's just some bad days. Dad had died. Other things had happened. I've had some tough times in AA. And each one of those times, I knew that AA worked and God was real. And I knew that day in that bed that AA worked and God was real. So I suppose if I came here with anything on my heart to share with you, and I've spent 50 minutes of your evening, right, telling you, telling my story, because I just love the sound of but if I came here to tell you anything, what I came here to tell you, whether you're new or you're old, I came to tell you this. AA works. What I mean is AA works. What I really mean by that is that AA works. And the reason that AA works, and what I know about the fact that AA works is this. God is real. AA works and God is real. AA works. It works. And God is real. Thank you for my time.